family, I really want to challenge you today as I speak to you from this subject. I brag different. I brag different. It's interesting to me, for those that know me and know me close, I love music. I can't sing, I can't play any instruments. For some reason, I love music. I don't know if when my mom was carrying me in the third trimester, if she was listening to music and dancing around, but whatever the case is, I love music. And I don't just listen to gospel music all day, every day. Sad to tell you, and it may hurt some of your feelings, or it may not, but I don't listen to gospel music all the time. In fact, Chris Brown is going to be my future praise and worship leader along with Millie. At one of our locations. It's going to be Chris Brown and Trey Songz leading praise and worship. I don't know how it's going to work, but we're going to make it happen. But nevertheless, in all seriousness, I love music. And Jay-Z, who's known by his family as Sean Carter, known to us more familiar as Jay-Z, also called Jigga, and also has the nickname Hova, Jehovah. Jay-Z has been the epiphany. He's been the model of what one should do when they love music, Justice. Jay-Z has took music from the street and used music as a platform to not only grow musically, but to become a billionaire. Jay-Z is 3 decades into this thing, 30 years in doing music, where you see people like Young Thug, who will probably have about another year or two in music, and they'll be done. Or some of you remember some of the old people that go back in music. Some of our parents may remember Milli Vanilli. They had a very short career. Some of you that have been in the rap game for a while, you may remember some rappers that had short careers, but Jay-Z has shown us the model of what it is to be a music artist, because he's 30 years in the game and he's used music not just to do music, but to produce, to have owned a team, to partially own a computer company. So he's shown us what music can do. For 30 years, he's been on the platform. He's been relevant in the generation before me, my generation, and your generation. He's been relevant for 30 years, 3 decades. Jay-Z has been relevant. Well, on July the 4th, 2016, Jay-Z teamed up with DJ Khaled and Future, and they produced this song called I Got Keys. And what's interesting about the song, because if you hear the title of it, it may throw you off. Some of you that know the street lingo, you can kind of understand the derogatory terms in which direction they're going. But there was one verse that caught me, the second verse by Jay-Z. He says something, a line that's very interesting, Justice. He says, with one of his bars, he says to us, he says, it's very interesting, you got to catch this. He tells us in that line, he says that my swag is different. That bag different. Let me pause and break that down for you, right? He says that my swag, meaning parents, grandparents, the confidence is different. He says that bag, which means his bank account and money, is different. So I had to give you that disclaimer before I get into where I'm going. So he says, my swag is different, that bag is different. Then he says, Beyonce is my wife, I brag different. Okay, I see some people looking at me real quick. Let me break it down, then I'm going to come back and I'm going to go through the line one more time to get where I'm going. So when he says swag, he's referring to confidence. When he says that bag, he's talking about his bank account and his money. He's a billionaire. And when he says Beyonce is my wife, I brag different, what Jay-Z was saying to us is that he married not only one of the most beautiful women in the industry, but he also married another billionaire. And because Beyonce is his wife, and the prestige that Beyonce has, because when Beyonce sings at the Super Bowl, then it has multi-million views because she's performing at halftime. So he says, because I married her, some sister should be shouting right here, I have a ability to brag differently. So he says, my swag different, my bag different, Beyonce, my wife, I brag different. And today I want to talk to us, because some of us in the room right now, it won't be relevant until we get deep into this message, but you got to get in the morning, get in the mirror sometime, and let yourself know that because of who God made you, your brag should be different. Y'all gonna make me go crazy early. See, I understand that how it feels to be in a position where people overlook you. Maybe your confidence is not where it should be. Maybe people didn't call your name when they should have called your name. Maybe you should have got credit for some of the stuff other people got credit for. Because I believe if T.D. Jakes said, people will shout and go crazy. But sometimes when Cray said, they just sit there and try to figure it out. But I've learned in my life, and maybe you'll catch this, that I can't be concerned about T.D. Jakes and his confidence. I just got to find it in myself to realize that God has fearfully and wonderfully made me, and because God made me who God made me, I got to stand in the mirror sometime and look at myself and say, you know what, Cray? You look mighty good today. Your haircut is fresh. You got it going on because I bragged. Y'all won't get this, but maybe it's because you deal with your life the way you deal with it. But I need about 5 people in here right now that understand that because of the way God made me, I can't worry about trying to be nobody else. I can't worry about what nobody else has going on. I can only be the best me that God made me. So when I wake up tomorrow morning, I ain't even gonna put no makeup on, sister. You don't even gotta do your lips yet. You don't have to do all your mascara. Just look at yourself in the rawest form and say, you know what? I look good just like this. In fact, I think Beyonce said, I woke up like this. And that gets me excited right there, because you don't have to fix yourself up for nobody, because this is who God made me, and if you don't like me how I am, that's cool. Why? Because I like myself. I brag. 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 I brag different. I'm trying not to stomp, because some people pick on me stomping, so I'm trying not to stomp. But I get excited. Here it is. As we look toward 2 Corinthians, looking toward 2 Corinthians is relatively interesting, because they say, according to scholars, that 2 Corinthians is the second letter of 5 letters that's been exchanged between the Corinthians and Paul. And of these 5 letters, 3 of them are considered to be lost letters, because we have access to 2 of them. That's 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. So the other 3 letters are considered to be lost letters. And of those 3 lost letters, it's believed that 2 of them Paul wrote back to the Corinthians, but the 3rd letter the Corinthians wrote in response to Paul. So it's believed that there's 5 letters. There's 5 letters that's been exchanged. We have access to 2, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, and 3 others. Paul wrote 2 to the Corinthians. The 3rd one they wrote back to him. And I'm only telling you this because I want to highlight the intensity of the relationship between Paul and the Corinthians. It's relatively interesting. So when we look at chapter 11 is quite the challenging text, because there's a dilemma that's going on in Corinth. There's a problem, there's an issue, there's a dilemma going on in chapter 11. And the dilemma begins with the fact that Paul has been preaching to them for 18 months for free. So Paul tells them in chapter 11, verse 7, 8, and 9, Paul says, I've been preaching to y'all for free. He says, I lowered myself and I preached to you at no expense and no charge. He says, I took money from other churches to take care of your church. Paul says in verse 9, he says, listen, when I was broke and I was in need, I didn't ask y'all for anything. Paul says, all these things have happened at the expense of me. Y'all didn't pay me anything. I lowered myself so that I can preach to y'all for 18 months with no charge. He says, I took money from other churches to take care of y'all. And even when I was broke and didn't have anything, I didn't ask y'all for nothing. And then when Paul leaves Corinth, after doing all of this at the expense of himself, when he leaves Corinth, family, 3 years in Ephesus, he looks back, and Corinth is being infested with false teachers. What's interesting about these false teachers is that they're speaking to the ego of the people in Corinth. And they were well dressed. They had these expensive brands. If you can look at it in ancient biblical times, they was dressed in the ancient biblical version of Louis Vuitton, and they had Chanel and Prada, and they had red bottoms. These false teachers, they were dressed in the very best, and they were eloquent. They spoke really well. So they had expensive brands on, Gucci and Louis Vuitton, Prada and Chanel. They had expensive brands. They spoke really eloquent. They were very unique. And when they come to Corinth, because of the culture in Corinth, their prestige, the way they were, their structure, their social setup, that attracted the Corinthians. Because if you can imagine these false teachers, they had the ancient biblical large following on the ancient biblical version of Instagram, of Facebook. They were very popular and prestigious, and because of this, it attracted the Corinthians to them. But you got to understand, Corinth, at the time, is one of the largest cities. It's about 600,000 people that lived in Corinth. Corinth was a place where the Greeks had their version of the Olympics, right? So Corinth was this very prestigious place. It had big buildings, big amphitheaters, and large temples. And everything about Corinth was based upon materialism. If I can bring it to the 21st century, Corinth was the ancient biblical version of Los Angeles. So everything was about being a star. Everything was about prestige and materialism. So they saw these false teachers coming in with the expensive gear on, the nice clothes, the Gucci, the Louis Vuitton, the Prada, the Chanel. They were eloquent in their speech. They articulated really well. They spoke well. And they showed up and they gave them the image of a star. And because in Corinth, the culture was about stars, it was like LA, it was like Hollywood. Because it was about stars, they're looking at these false teachers, but then you got to see Paul. Paul didn't have much money. They said that Paul had an issue with his eyes. One scholar says that one of his eyes was really lazy. Another scholar said that he was cross-eyed. They said that he had a humped over back, so he was bent over with a cross-eyed, and he had a long beard. He didn't have nice clothes. But what Paul did is spoke to them and preached them what they needed, but he wasn't giving them what they wanted. Okay, y'all are about to miss this. The false teachers gave them the desire of stars. But Paul, who didn't have much money, had a humpback, was cross-eyed, didn't look attractive, didn't have nothing that was appealing to them. He was preaching and teaching what they needed, but he wasn't giving them what they wanted. And let me pause for a moment, because my mama used to tell me all the time when I was a kid, don't let your eyes be bigger than your stomach. And she used to say that in relation to food, but it's not only relevant to food and overeating, but it speaks to every area of our lives. You know why? Because you got to be careful not to forfeit your 80% because you think the 20% looks better. Okay, y'all are about to miss this. You got to be careful that you don't allow your emotional state or your mindset in the moment to get you caught up on chasing something that's 20% because it look good when you got 80% of what you need. I think they call it the 80-20 rule, or better yet, if I can speak to a generation, Prophet Chris Brown said it best, the grass ain't greener. So you got to be careful not to look on the other side and think that what they have or what somebody else looks like that is good for you. And Paul was facing this issue. Paul had what they needed, but the other false teachers had what they wanted. And let me say this to a young brother right now. You got to be careful about chasing what you want. You better find what you need, because what you want will get you in more trouble than what you need. I'm so glad that I've learned in my mature mind that it looks good, but everything that look good ain't good. Everything that glisten ain't gold. So you got to be careful that you don't forfeit your 80 because you're chasing 20. Mama told me, don't let your eyes be bigger than your stomach. So Paul, the situation, they like, nah, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Prada, Chanel, red bottles, Coach bag, Michael Kors watch, Paul. Okay. Decked out, speak well, eloquent, articulate, big words, Paul. Humpback, cross-eyed, dirty clothes, long beard. They have a problem, but the difference is Paul has what they need, because Paul's preaching the gospel. Paul's carrying something that'll sustain you, because one day you might outgrow the Prada. One day you might get tired of the Michael Kors. One day the eloquent speech and articulate words won't mean nothing, and you need something that's going to sustain you. And Paul was talking about Jesus while they were talking about jeans. So you got to be careful that you don't dress yourself up and look good, but you're dying on the inside. You know how many people in this room right now look good when they go places every day? Their makeup is just right, their clothes are just right, they got a nice car, but they ain't got no Christ out of them. And I don't care how much stuff you got. The Bible says, what is it if a man or woman gains the world but forfeits their soul? It's interesting because there's a dilemma that's going on, and Paul doesn't look as good as the false teachers. They're decked out. They look better than them. So Paul gets word from the tattletale at the Corinth church. The tattletale sends an ancient biblical version text message through the ancient biblical iPhone 10 and says, listen, Paul, these false teachers are here. They look nice, they dress nice, they speak eloquently, and the tattletale said, Paul, check this out. Everything you taught us, we put on the back burner because the new prophets are here. The new apostles, these false teachers are here. They look good. They sound good. And everything you taught us, Paul, we put on the back burner. So Paul now starts to write a letter, and he opens up chapter 11, and he says, listen, he says, what I'm about to say is going to sound foolish. But if y'all going to listen to them brag, I'm going to brag different. Watch what happens. So Paul in verse 5, he starts bragging. Chapter 11, verse 5, Paul says, he says, wait a minute. He says, I'm as good as those so-called super apostles. I'm just as good as them. He says, I may not speak as well as they do, but I know as much as they do. And then in verse 16, he keeps bragging. He says, listen, I don't want y'all to think I'm a fool. But if you do, let me foolishly brag. Okay, I'm about to get, before it's over, I'm probably going to jump off this stage in a moment. He says, I don't want y'all to think I'm a fool, but if you do, let me foolishly brag. Can I give y'all my first thought today? Sometimes you have to foolishly brag a little. Okay, this ain't going to make sense, but I'm going to make it make sense. Watch this. Verse 17 gives us why. Because it's not about bragging for the Lord's sake. It's about bragging for the sake of people. Watch what Paul says in verse 17. Paul says, when I do all this bragging, I'm not doing it for the Lord. Okay, y'all are about to miss this. I'm about to go crazy. I promise I am. He says, I'm not doing this for the Lord. In essence, Paul says the only reason I'm bragging is because my bragging in this moment will draw the Corinthians back to me. Okay, my boys know me really well. We went to Troy not too long ago. I'm going to tell a couple stories today. We went to Troy not too long ago, and I told them I don't care about cars, right? I drive a Maxima right now that has one light, and I'm good. I will park next to a Benz, park next to a Bentley if need. I don't care what nobody thinks. When I get out of it, I got that car. I love that car. I'm going to drive it till the wheels fall off. Then I'm going to put new wheels on it. It don't bother me. It's got one light. It's wrecked. It's been wrecked for a year. So it don't bother me. But I told my boys who went to Troy, I told them, I said, I'm going to get me a Range Rover, not because I want it, but because people need to see me driving a Range. Why, Cray? Because some people only associate success with nice cars. So I can have a nice car, but be renting my place to stay. So sometimes you got to do certain stuff to attract certain people. And Paul said, I'm not bragging for God. I'm bragging so the Corinthians can see that the same thing the false teachers got, I got too. So what are you saying, Cray? I'm not going to get a Range Rover because I want to brag to y'all. I'm going to get a Range Rover to show you that God can do what the drug dealer can do, that God can do what the NFL player can do. So when you see me stunting, I'm not going to be stunting because it's God. I'm stunting to show you that the same thing anybody in the world can do, God can do it better. So sometimes you have to foolishly brag, not because of God, but so that you can win people. Paul said it like this, I become the weak to win the weak. And as crazy and non-traditional as it sounds, sometimes your bragging and your confidence, it ain't about doing it for God. It's about winning somebody else. Because you'll be surprised how many people won't serve a pastor if the pastor don't look a certain way. You'll be surprised how many of us in high school won't talk to a certain social group because they don't look a certain way. So every now and again, you got to show other social groups as smart and cute and fine as you think you are, so am I. Paul says, I don't want y'all to call me a fool, but if you do, let me foolishly brag. Here it is. Dolores is my bae. She's about 9 foot tall from bottom to top. She has an interesting shape and a unique glow to her sterling silver complexion. And if you're not careful, you'll be mesmerized by what's on the outside of Dolores, but it's what's on the inside that matters. On the inside of Dolores, she's illuminated by bright lights and loud sounds. The sounds are generated by buttons that you cannot touch. Dolores is moved by the sound of my voice and my voice alone. And she responds to me in an imaginative tone directly to me. Dolores is moved by imagination. So if you don't have imagination, Dolores won't move. Dolores is my spiritual imaginative time machine. And she allows me to travel anywhere I want to go at the command of my voice in time. And about midnight last night, me and Dolores got together. I commanded her to move. And Dolores took me through the airways of antiquity and down the hallways of history and brought me to the 4th century, 55 AD, to have an interview with Paul. So in the interview with Paul, after traveling with Dolores down the airways of antiquity and down the hallways of history, I came to speak to Paul. And I said, Paul, why, out of all the times you could have bragged, out of all the times you could have boasted, Paul, why did you now decide to brag? I said, Paul, you could have bragged to the Ephesians. You could have bragged to those that were Galatians. Paul, you could have bragged to those that was in Rome. Out of all the times when you could have bragged, Paul, I asked him, why did you choose to brag now? And Paul said, Cray, chose to brag now. Number one, because your brag is different when your service is different. Watch what this text says. The text says, Paul is in verse 23 in conversation with them. Paul says, so are they servants of Jesus Christ? So am I. And then he said, but I serve Jesus better than they do. This blessed me, family, because I learned to understand that you got to not only know who you serve, but you got to know how you serve. And the reason that a lot of people can't shout and celebrate over this is because they don't have no service. And see, you can brag differently when you know your service has been differently. When you know you've been faithfully going to church, when you know you've been in Bible study, when you know you've been reading your word, when you know you've been praying to God, not just about what you want, but praying to God about who God is. When you've been connected to God, you can brag a little bit differently. Some people have no equity to brag because they haven't put nothing in with God. But when you know you spent some personal time with God, when your life is starting to be directed toward God, your brag is different because your service is different. When you know that you've been loving your enemies when you shouldn't have been loving them, when you know you loved your neighbor as you loved yourself, when you know you've forgiven people, then your brag is different. Let me bring it home. When you should have cussed them out and you didn't. Okay, I thought that'd help you. When you should have got mad, but you didn't. Or when you did cuss them out, and the you that wouldn't apologize before came back and apologized this time. I know that every pastor ain't going to tell you that, but that's called growth. Y'all ain't liking me right there. So when you know that you've grown, when you should have creeped and sent the text message as a response to that text message, and you didn't, that's called growth. That's because your service is getting better. So now you can stand up and brag and say, what I used to do, I don't do no more. Because my service is different. How I usually respond, I don't respond the same way because my service is different. And Paul is saying to us, your brag is different when your service is different. So yeah, I know that they serve Jesus. Paul said, but I serve him better. Here's why. You can brag different because your service is different. When you know you've been committed to doing the things of God, it's not about being perfect. It's about the effort that you give to doing. The problem with some people, they give no effort at all. It's different when you lay in bed on Sunday morning and you did something on Saturday night versus when you did something crazy on Saturday night, but you still willed your way up, got out of the bed, put on some clothes, and you came into the house of the Lord. And Impact, we made it easy because now you ain't got to iron nothing. You just throw on what you got on and just come just the way you are. So you have no excuse to say, I don't got nothing to wear no more. So it's about the effort to serve. For Christ said, I didn't come to be served. I came to serve. Paul said, Cray, the reason I brag different is because my service is different. He said, number two, your brag is different when you put the work in. So I went to train Mom NFL in 2006. I was in the 2007 draft. So I went to train in 2007. So I went to North Carolina to train, right? And for those that don't know me, I'm very kind of subconscious about taking my shirt off, right? Like, I never really take my shirt off in public settings. My boys will tell you when we work out, they've never seen me work out with my shirt off in public settings when other people are around. When I go to the pool, I'm that guy in the pool with his shirt on. When I'm at the beach, the most I'm going to do at the beach is wear a wife beater because I keep my shirt on. I'm very funny about taking my shirt, not because, you know, I don't do push-ups, but I'm very subconscious about taking my shirt off. Well, I'm training for the NFL in North Carolina, right? And we never got a break. I mean, we went from Monday to Saturday, and we went to church on Sunday trying to pray and be saved so God will bless us with the NFL, right? So every single day, we're working hard, we're grinding, we're working hard, we're grinding. So we got one day off. And me and my roommate at the time, when we was in Raleigh, his name was Kofi. Kofi was from Washington, D.C. Me and him, we said, man, we got to get out of here. We got to get out this hotel. We've been eating all day. We've been working out. We've been training, all this stuff. So at the time, I'm like 183, right? This going to make sense in just a second. Right now, I'm like 170 something. So I was like 183, right? So I'm not little, Miss Joanne. I'm the opposite of most of my friends. Most of my friends, when they graduated or stopped playing ball, they got bigger. Somehow I got smaller, right? I'm the same size I was in high school. So then I was about 183. So we went over to one of the local colleges, HBCU. We went over there, and they playing basketball, Dre. Now, I'm not the best basketball player by any means, right? I can play, I'm athletic, I can jump, I can run, but I'm not the best by any means. But when we walked in there, me and Kofi went, we picked up a couple more guys, and we won 2 straight games. The gym was crazy lit. I don't know what it is about HBCUs. Nobody went to class. They was all in the rec center. So we ended up playing basketball. We won 2 straight games. And I'm talking trash. I don't talk trash a whole lot. But if I make about 2 baskets in a row, you know, I start, you know. And because the gym was lit. Well, going into the 3rd game, 7 girls walk in the gym. Y'all see my story going? I look. I'm subconscious about taking my shirt off. 7 girls walk. So these guys who we just beat twice, one of them see the girls, we all see the ladies, he takes his shirt off. I look at him, I'm like, you put your shirt, that little bird chest. So I'm looking at him, like, are you serious? So we on the court, and I get a little fast break, and I dunk. I'm just playing. That sounded good. But I lay it up. So I get about 2 baskets in a row, and I'm looking at the girls. But the girls are pointing at the little skinny dude with his shirt off. So I'm confused because I just dunked, and y'all looking at him with his shirt off. So I'm subconscious about taking my shirt off. But then I started thinking about every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I'm working out. I'm training for the NFL. I'm much bigger than he is. So the game is going. I stop the game. Hold on. I go to the side. Say, man, my shirt wet. I take my shirt off. And the girls over there, I backpedal. Because here's why y'all about to miss it. Because I knew I put the work in. I can look at him and tell he had put no work in. But because I had confidence in myself, I knew I put the work in. For one time, I took my shirt off to show and brag about the work I had put in. Why, Dre? Because your brag is different when you put the work in. Let me try to bring this home. I had to search to find this, right? The term brag, a synonym for brag is swagger. God. So in other words, it's not about what I said vocally or oratorically. It's about what I was showing. I was showing my swagger. Why, Cray? Because I had put the work in. And the difference in some people is, you know, when you put the work in, your swagger changes. Your mood changes. That's why you can't allow people to talk you down about stuff that you know you put the work in for, because it changes your mood, changes your swagger. It makes your brag different when you put the work in. Here it is. Put the work in. Your brag is different when you put the work in. And then third and finally, your brag is different when you survive. Let me show y'all what Paul says. I want to be efficient in this. Listen to what Paul says. Paul says, my brag is different. Here's why. He said, I serve better than they do. Check this out. He says, I've worked harder than them. I've been put in jail more times. I've been beaten with whips more. I've been in danger of death more. 5 times my own people gave me 39 lashes with a whip. 3 times the Romans beat me with a big stick. Once my enemy stoned me. I've been shipwrecked 3 times. I've had to spend a night and a day in the sea. I've been in danger from the rivers, in danger by robbers, danger from my own people. My life has been in danger in cities, in deserts, at the sea, and with people who only pretended to be the Lord's followers. He said, I've worked and struggled and spent sleepless nights. I've gone hungry and thirsty and oftentimes with nothing to eat. I've been cold from not having enough clothes. Paul says in Essence Family, I can brag different because all the things I just named, he survived. And let me help some of you students, let me help some of you parents. The reason your brag is different because all the stuff you've been through, you can say today you survived it. When people talked about you, I know it bothers you, but you survived it. When people said stuff about your family, said you wasn't going to amount to anything, I know it bothers you, but you survived it. All the stuff that you experienced as a child, you survived it. All the trouble, all the drama, all the trauma, everything you've been through, you can celebrate yourself because you survived it. And I don't think I got enough survivors in the room, but I just know for myself, I can only be who I am because I survived everything I've been through. Not many of us can attest to this, but I survived growing up as the only boy to a single mother. I survived people saying that I couldn't make it to college and I went anyway. Been 3 times. I survived when people talked about us making and getting this church. We survived, and you got to think about your own life. What stuff have you already survived? You survived the stuff that people said you wouldn't. You survived stuff that people tried to do, try to attack you. The reason I brag different is because I survived. And the sister gave a testimony earlier letting you know that even at her age in the 11th grade that she had to survive some stuff. And baby, let me tell all of you right now, you may not be able to celebrate just yet, but they used to say that there's a storm out on the ocean. Y'all ain't gonna help me preach. And it's moving this way. And if your soul's not anchored in Jesus, you will certainly, let me tell you, you may not, you may not have been through the storm yet, but there's certainly a storm that's coming your way. There's storms of finances. There's storms of stress. There's storms of aggravation. There's storms of breaking up with your high school sweetheart and breaking up with your college sweetheart and trying to find yourself. There's storms in identity. There's storm crisis all over. If you haven't experienced a storm yet, I promise you that the storm is coming. But the greatest thing that you can do is make sure that when the storm comes, just like when Michael comes, sometimes you just got to be prepared for the storm. Let's see if I can make this make sense. Sometimes you gotta board up your windows. You gotta make sure that you got stuck sandbags around your doors. Sometimes you gotta make sure that you've already prepared for the storm that's coming your way. But the beauty in all of that is I already know that I'm gonna survive. I can't wait. I can't wait one day when people just think about. When you think back over your own life and all that you've been through, you got to know that the storm you went through, it should have killed you. The accident you was in, it should have killed you. The drugs you tried, they should have killed you. The boyfriend that beat on you, he should have killed you. The wife that walked out, it should have killed you. But aren't you glad you had the victory before the storm ever got there? Yeah, I wish I had the energy and the sound to really give y'all what I'm feeling right now, but I'm so glad I can just testify about my own life. I'm so glad that after trying crack coke or trying powder cocaine, I survived. I'm so glad that after every blunt that I smoke and every blunt that I try, I still survive. I'm so glad after drinking and driving, after mixing brown liquor and liquor, I still survive. I'm so thankful after all the women I chased and been with, I still survive. I'm so glad after all the lies people told on me, I still survive. I'm so glad that after all the things people said, we'll lose this church. He won't stay there for 2 years. We still survive. And you got to think back on your own life. Think about all the crises in your life and how you say, I thank God that I survived everything I went through. Because if you didn't survive, somebody wouldn't be able to look at your story and celebrate. I'm not ashamed of nothing I did. I'm not ashamed of nothing I've been through. I'm not ashamed of nothing nobody said. I'm just glad that I survived. And every now and again, you can't look at the fact that you don't have enough money. You can't look at the fact that you don't have a boy or bae. You can't look at the fact of all the stuff going on. You just got to look at the fact I survived. And is there anybody in here that's glad like I am that you survived everything you went through? Stuff that killed other people, you survived it. Stuff that made them go crazy and lose their mind, you survived it. You got to be glad today and celebrate God because you survived. Paul said, the reason that I brag different is because, number one, I serve better than they do. He says, they're servants of Jesus Christ. Well, I serve Jesus better. He says, the reason I brag different is because I work harder. I put the work in. And he says, the reason that I brag different is because I survive. He said, listen, y'all, Paul said, I went to jail more times than they did. I was beaten more times than they were. I faced death more times than they did. He said, my own people gave me 39 slashes with a whip. He said, the Romans beat me with a stick 3 times. He said, I was shipwrecked in the middle of the water 3 different times. He said, I spent a day and a night in the water. He said, I was feared by robbers chasing me. I was feared by my own people. He said, when I went to the desert, they chased me there. When I was in the sea, they chased me there. When I was in my own city, he said, all this stuff. But he survived. So don't you let one failed test cause you to stress yourself out. You know why? Because you might fail one, but you'll survive. Don't you let not passing the SAT cause you to stress. You know why? Because you may not pass it, but there's schools that are set up to help you survive. Don't you let the fact of being from a small city with 4,100 people cause you to think that you can't make it. You know why? Because you can look at me, you can look at people around you, and guess what, Keegan? We came from Hazlehurst, we came from Alma, we came from Baxley, we came from Lyle, but guess what? We survived. Don't you let one breakup end your life and make you not think about dating or marrying again. You know why? Because you survived. Don't you look at your parents' situation because their marriage didn't work out and other marriages didn't work out and think that you can't be married. You know why? Because you will survive. Everyone to your feet. I'm done. Yelled at y'all enough. But Dre, we survived. Crusher, we survived. Miss Sylvia, we survived. Miss Trina, breast cancer, we survived. We survived. We survived. You got to get, I'm going to take a few minutes. I got to get out of y'all way. But you just got to get that in your spirit the way I feel it. You survived. You survived. You survived. I know your little friend ain't your friend no more, but you survived. I know the relationship didn't work, but you survived. I know they look like they happy with somebody else, but you survived. God, you survived. And I thank God that I survived. Money may not be there, but you survived. And I'm glad that you survived. Listen, grab somebody's hand really